everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Inc. I have a very special guest with me today, David Finberg. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ali, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to join you guys.
So before we get started, why don't you give the audience a little background on who you are, what you do, and what it is you specialize in?
I specialize in SEO. I run a company called Peaks Digital Marketing, where we focus on web development, SEO, and best practices for local, national enterprise businesses. We've been doing this for about 10 years. I've been in the industry for, longer than that if you count some of the websites that I've created, even in my early teen and tween years creating websites. So going to share a lot of great tips today for how you can help boost up your local SEO and find some new opportunities maybe with your Google business and some of the other platforms that exist to add some more value. So it should be a value-packed show today.
Yeah, definitely excited to talk about this. As I mentioned before, this is not a topic that we cover a lot on this show, but it is something that's very important. However, just based on all of the businesses that I've worked with in the past, this is something they really don't understand on a technical level. I think overall, most businesses do realize why SEO is important. But for those people who maybe don't know a ton about it, can you give us a little background on what SEO actually is and why it matters for your business?
So SEO is what they call search engine optimization. The most popular search engine out there that we all use is Google. And there are different ways that you can actually have Google promote your website for free at the top of the search results. So we all know about Facebook ads and LinkedIn ads and Instagram ads, maybe even Google ads, which are non-social platform that you can use to advertise your business. And so a lot of these platforms are pay to play, right? Every click that you get, every impression that you get billed for these. Whereas SEO, it's a little bit different, right? You're not paying Google, you're actually paying a firm like ours or an expert like me to come in and basically optimize your site so that it can rank a little bit higher in the Google search. And there are a lot of technical aspects to it. It has a lot to do with the speed of your website and titles and keywords and all of these things that can really muddy the waters for people. At the end of the day, Google's job is to promote great websites and great experiences. And so today I'd love to share with you and your audience about how we can, at a lower level, still make a great impact across your business using some SEO techniques and tips without necessarily having to be a coder or a programmer or a search engine algorithm expert.
I would love for you to share those. I do know that this is one thing that most people who are familiar with SEO, they do understand this is not an instant gratification type of strategy. It does take time. I'm sure that's something that you're going to cover today. But just like with anything else, if you are willing to invest the time or the money to have someone help you with something like this, it can have a tremendous impact in your business. So with that being said, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with tip number one?
Tip number one is actually a relatively easy one. It's go ahead and claim your Google business profile if you don't have one. And if you do have one, it's really easy. It's actually just getting more reviews. And so we buy from people that either have similar experiences, backgrounds, or circumstances. And we also buy from people that we like in our communities. And social proof on your website is just as important to have social proof on Google. And basically what that means is sending out review links, finding ways to guide people to leave reviews for your business. There's difference between testimonial and reviews. So testimonial is more of like solicitation. Hey, leave us a 5-star, right? Here's a $25 gift card to leave us a 5-star. You can get in the water. Those are a little aggressive. I would say having just something simple like a review link. You can actually go into your Google business, or my team can show you how to go into your Google business and find that link. And then you can share that either via text message or via email, and just encouraging people to leave more feedback. We trust businesses that tend to have higher numbers of reviews. And if you've got a Google business account or you don't, first step is get the Google business account. It's going to be a platform that you can use to garner more reviews. You can upload photos. There's all these great, amazing things. But if you do have one, the most important thing you can be doing and should be doing on a consistent basis is building up your reputation, building up that expertise and authoritativeness to your listing. And reviews are a great kind of low friction way to be able to do that without needing to really specialize in search engine algorithms. Businesses that have more reviews and more social proof not only convert higher, but just do better in the rankings. And so one of those kind of key differentiators is if you have reviews on your website, but you don't have them on Google, Try to get more reviews, and that can apply to multiple platforms, right? So it's so often people are conditioned to look for multiple sets of reviews, not just like the first ones they see. And so making sure that your Facebook's got good reviews, your Yelp, your Google Business, right? These are all great platforms that you can leverage to your advantage. And by doing so, you'll actually get a little bit more search engine traffic, and you'll be able to convert traffic a little bit higher when someone types in your brand name and searches reviews, or just in general, right? So Google sees that websites that have higher rankings tend to have a really great, what they call authoritativeness or trust factor. So reviews are one of those big ones. Don't miss out on that. And also, one pro tip is don't try to get 10 reviews in a day. You should just slowly trickle them in. Make it seem like you're trying to game the system or create a bunch of reviews from a bunch of different people all at once. It's more about consistency and doing over a long period of time as you're setting foot on this journey.
And I think that for a lot of people listening, just to make sure you understand what he's talking about, this is not necessarily your website itself. The Google My Business profile is something that if you do have a local business, especially, you should already have this. We have talked about this before. If you guys do not have one yet, you absolutely need to, because this is, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, but one of the best ways for local businesses, especially, to rank higher without having to worry about their existing website. Because depending on if you have been focusing on more traditional SEO in the past, or if you have not been, that can seem like potentially a pretty daunting task to work your way up in the rankings. And this can be more of what I would call a quick win for some really high intent search terms that are actually looking for someone to work with. There is no better time to start than today, but if you already have one and you haven't been actually focusing on how to optimize that so you will show up for the keywords that really represent what your ideal customers are searching for, then that is a really simple way to do it. But it's also going to help anyone who's looking for your business to see that you are legit, you can be trusted, and other people have had great experiences with you.
That's well said, and it's so important, right? It's like a sometimes even a shortcut to rankings. It's as you said, a quick win. I think if you don't have one, go to business.google.com and you can claim your listing. You just add in your address, your phone number. If you don't have an address, you can claim a service area business. But for most of us that run, storefronts and have local businesses, you definitely want to put that address in there. Get some reviews to that listing. So this kind of goes into step 2, which is like optimize your Google business, which is create some great experiences for users. Like how often do we go and we see like an ATM and it has like a 2-star review and there's like one photo, or like a bank, and it's just one of those kind of interesting differentiators that subconsciously we're looking for these things that we don't always think about it in the eyes of our customer. Some quick wins for your Google business would be like optimizing some photography, right? Businesses that upload more photos tend to rank a little bit higher. So making sure that you get a nice collage of photos and ensuring that those are optimized and uploaded to that listing is really going to help. A lot of what your Google business ranks for ties into your content on your website, right? So if you're doing blogging, you're creating landing pages or upgraded experiences on the website, that's actually going to help your Google business just as almost like an unintended consequence. The third thing that you really want to focus on, aside from images and optimizing content, making sure that you're syndicating new content on your website, is going to be things like accuracy, like hours, holiday hours. A lot of people aren't going in around holidays and setting their holiday hours, or they're not going in and really taking a comprehensive approach and putting a description in there and putting the right hours and putting team member pictures on there and exterior photos and here's where to park and here's where. So think about it from the angle of like, this is your platform. It's one that is managed through Google, but you basically own it. And you should try to make it as optimized as possible by filling out all the information, by really putting some great keywords. Don't keyword stuff it, right? But put some keywords in there, put some services and differentiators. And what that's going to allow you to do is Google's actually going to start ranking a little bit higher for those terms. And so over time, if you're getting new reviews, you're uploading some photos, you're managing the content on your website, you're finding new ways to engage and interact. There's like messaging features and all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do through Google Business, and you're staying consistent and active on it, you'll actually get a little bit more engagement from Google, because Google will say, We only want to promote the best businesses, and the best businesses are responding to reviews. They're getting new reviews. They're updating their holiday hours. They're uploading pictures. They're asking clients to upload pictures, maybe in some of their reviews. So there's all these different kind of levers that you can pull. If you just focus on a couple at a time, you don't have to do all these at once. You really will see quite an uptick in your traffic and your visibility, and you'll be able to compete on a more competitive level with other businesses in your area. And over time, as the algorithm updates and Google changes and reevaluates sites, right, you'll start to see that your site will just continue to move up. There's actually some search insights in Google search, not Google Search Console, but Google My Business, that will show what kind of keywords and terms that you're ranking for and how many calls you got for the month. So you should be able to. We're really big here at Peaks on tracking and using data driven marketing and finding methods to continue to improve and measure against ourselves. And that's, I think, the component of all small businesses. We all love to find ways to be better at what we're doing and overcome any of the challenges or roadblocks that may appear along the way. And so taking a look at what were my calls, how many calls did I get, what was my call volume, how many searches did I come up for, and can actually look at it over the course of a quarter to see if you're improving and how much you're improving for and for what key terms. So it's almost like having another website, right? It's like another platform in addition to your website that can drive leads. And so a lot of SEOs, agree that Google Business is powerful. But I would argue that Google Business can arguably even be more important than your website. And I'm sure, Ali, you've covered this topic a few times. So just to harp on that, if you don't have one or you have one that isn't fully optimized, like leveraging that could be a huge game changer for you in 2022, 2023. So things to consider as you're trying to get the most low hanging fruit out of your SEO campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ultimately it's so fast to be able to update your profile that there's really nothing that you can blame if you have not done that yet. You could, at the end of this episode, go ahead and do it. You could be done in less than an hour. If you already have a website, take what you already have from your website and go ahead and use that as a jumpstart. Pull some copy about your services, pull some imagery that you felt was quality enough to go on your website, add it to your profile. And I do think that it's very interesting the types of clientele that you're going to see coming from Google My Business, because as opposed to a lot of businesses, more traditional SEO, let's say that you were optimizing your blog post on your site, depending on what your content in those posts is about, you may be finding that a lot of the traffic coming to those pages is a little bit higher in the funnel because they're more in that information gathering stage, which can still be really important. But ultimately, what Google is doing is based on the type of search terms that are being put into Google, it's showing or not showing these Google My Business listings. And so they want to show these listings to search terms that are clearly looking for a store or a service provider or a business that someone can work with to make it easier to sift through all of the content. And so if you look at this from Google's perspective, they want to make sure that people are getting what it is they're searching for as quickly as possible. And if they can tell that you're searching for some type of business or service to work with, they want to serve those up to you as quickly as possible, which really puts you at the very top of those search listings. And if you were trying to get one of your pages on your website to rank at the very top of page one, you are going to likely have a very difficult or just long-term time achieving that. And so you're going to have greater visibility with this, but you're also going to have those higher intent leads that are looking for someone to work with in the short term. So you need to make sure that you are showing up, especially for these people. Like David mentioned, this is really your low hanging fruit. And again, going back to just looking at this from Google's perspective, they want to make sure that they're not directing people to businesses that are out of business, businesses that don't provide what it is that person was actually looking for, because that person drives to that business looking for that thing that Google kind of insinuated they had and they don't. That's not a good experience for the consumer. And it also just doesn't want to direct people to kind of spam or non-existent businesses. So the more information that you provide to that profile, the more legit you will appear, the more information they'll have on what you actually do so they can serve your listing to people who are looking for those specific things. And also, again, like you said, making sure that you have those exterior photos, especially if you're a local business, because if people are driving to where you are and they're not familiar with the area potentially, you want them to recognize what your business looks like. They do need to know where to park in a lot of occasions. So the goal here is to just make it as easy as possible to for someone to find you, but also visit you or take that best next step based on whatever it is your business does into that process of actually working with you. So it's very fast, it's very easy, but it's really impactful. So again, just take some time after this episode is over today, check your listing, make sure those things are in there. And it really is not as daunting of a process, at least on that front, than you may imagine it would be. David, what's your next tip regarding SEO or Google My Business specifically?
That's just slam dunk that one. I feel like that is the perfect kind of way to close that one out. The other SEO tips that I was going to share today have more to do with what we call like an on-page SEO. So on-page SEO is SEO that happens on your actual website. And so a lot of this on-page SEO, kind of like we touched on briefly during the earlier part of this call, can affect your Google business. And when you're looking at your website, do you have what they call meta titles and descriptions for all of your pages? These are core kind of statements, just like putting that description on Google Business is super paramount. So is having your meta titles and your descriptions with keyword rich terms. So if you're a local restaurant, architect, interior design, doesn't matter what it is, it could be a B2B service, making sure that your titles and your tags are optimized is a huge no-brainer. And it's one that, can take a little bit of time to create. Like it's roughly about 160 characters, so a couple of sentences, and then your title tag is about 70 characters, roughly a sentence. The goal is that you're inserting some keywords into those, right? And so if you're, for an example, say dentistry in Scottsdale, Arizona, that would be a great title for your homepage or for your locations page. And then a meta title for that could be something along the lines of your differentiators, a call to action, something that's actionable and gets the user's attention. So what we like to do is start it off with some actionable content. Find the best dentist in Scottsdale, in business for 20 plus years, A+ BBB rating, online and by phone appointments, or whatever you want to say, or maybe put some differentiators in, like award-winning team, or we can handle everything from root canals all the way to simple cleanings. It's an opportunity, just like Google Business, just to showcase a little bit of, give people a taste and make it important. One question that we get a lot is like, how do I know what a good meta title and description is? Where I would start looking at the first page of the results, and I would see, just take some qualitative data around what you're seeing. For a chiropractic office, it might be same day appointments, right? For auto shop, it might be ASC certified technician or whatever it is, right? Credentials, certifications, convenience points, or differentiators. I think experience really goes hand in hand with that. So I would always, if you're a newer business, don't worry too much about it. But if you've been in business for 20 years, say that. And so just being able to work some of that content into those titles and descriptions, make sure that you have keywords for every page. So if you have, in the dentist example, like a tooth cleaning page or teeth cleaning page or tooth whitening page, you'd want to make sure that those keywords are in the titles, and maybe put some location modifiers in there. So teeth whitening Scottsdale or something along those lines is really going to help Google understand like what location you serve, and you're actually going to, the idea is, get a higher click-through rate. What happens if you don't have these? Google will auto-generate it, so it's not a huge problem. But sites that tend to have this information complete rank a lot better. And then you can actually check and see how your rankings are doing. If you want an advanced tip, you can set up your Google Search Console and actually see what was my click-through rate for this term, and then maybe try another meta description, or hey, this new meta description didn't work as well as the old one, we need to roll it back, kind of thing. Can be more of a tedious component, but I would say for right now, just keeping things super simple focus on making sure that every page has one. Meta title and meta description. And that's a really good starting place for your on-page SEO. The second place that I would tell you to look is page speed is a huge factor when users browse a website, right? So we now have 4 and 5G, in some cases 3G, depending on where you're at. If you're in the boonies or if you're in a downtown. Long story short, we want to make sure that our websites are accessible for all types of users. And so one big kind of I'd say missed opportunity for business owners is they have someone uploading images to their website directly from their iPhones. So they took that new team photo and the picture looks so crisp and clear. It's got all this amazing resolution. A lot of that image won't even, if you have a iPhone 12, it's going to take a 10 megapixel image where your phone's probably going to show like a 5 megapixel. So
Yeah.
what Google says is like, try to resize those images or compress them. You can go to tinypng.com and it's a free website tool where you can just drag and drop your image. It's going to reduce the file size down to more acceptable range for mobile devices. And in turn, what that's going to do is actually help more users convert. It's going to reduce the amount of users that bounce away from your site. Ali, I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 28.8 dial-up 56K era. So we were used to a website taking a long time to load. Nowadays, even with cable internet and 4 and 5G and 3G, like we still expect it's instant. And businesses that have faster websites almost have a different perception about their brand. It's like, wow, their website's quick, their service is probably going to be quick, their experience is going to be top notch. But if your website's slow, does your website reflect the quality of your brand and the expediency of your brand? Like maybe not, right? If it's really taking a long time, that image is just chugging away and the browser spinning its wheels, right? Like 9 times out of 10, we're hitting the back button and trying someone else. So the barrier to entry shouldn't be your website speed. It should be, is this product or service the right fit? And so there are a lot of angles and ways that you can speed up your website. If you're on WordPress, you can use a plugin called WP Rocket. These are more advanced types of SEO, and I'd say at a owner level or if you have an internal person that helps with your website, like one thing you can do is just optimize those images. About 50% of your loading speed, if not more, can just be imagery. So if you start there, I guarantee you that you'll see a little bit more traffic, a little bit more website visibility, some more leads come in, and just start with checking that or having your web developer check like what are the sizes of my images, are any of them too big? You can run your website through Google Page Speed Insights. It'll actually tell you if your imagery is too big. GT Metrics, GTMetrix is another good website that you can use to test the speed, and it'll make some recommendations without going too much into the details. Like you don't need to apply all of them, just focus on the imagery for right now. And you can always bring in some heavier lifting for the optimization of the theme and the plugins and the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things back to the meta descriptions and the meta titles. So if you're not familiar with those terms and what they mean, this is really what is coming up for your page when someone searches, but it's also what would show up if you were to take a URL and maybe post it on social media. So it's going to be that preview that comes up. It'll have that title, which you will see in that tab in your browser, at least in part. And then it's going to be that initial snippet of text that previews. And the keywords aren't going to show up. The name of the author may show up and sometimes an image, but that's really what he's talking about when he is discussing the meta titles and the meta description. So it's what gives someone their first taste at what they're going to find on that page, which will help them decide if they want to click on that page or not. And when those are auto-generated, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, it's just not that compelling. It's really not giving people a reason to want to click. So you can think of these as like mini Google ads. I would say write them in a way that you would consider writing a Google ad. You want that strong title that will capture their attention and a description that really incentivizes them to click your page as opposed to someone else's, because that really is what we're dealing with when we're dealing with organic search. There's a lot of competition around you. So when he says add those differentiators in there, it's because when they're seeing this page, it's not on its own. It's around other pages and other listings. And so you need to be able to stand out in some way so that you will receive that click as opposed to somebody else. And a tool that I would really recommend if you are using WordPress would be Yoast SEO. So this was one that I got when I first started learning about SEO many years ago, and it really simplifies a lot of the on-page process. So if you're not sure what it is that Google or any other browser or search console is actually looking for when they decide if your page is optimized or not, it gives you a really great overview, and it'll actually give you a green check mark if it looks good, a red if it looks bad, and yellow or orange if it needs some attention. So at least it's something that will give you a little bit more concrete evidence as to how your pages currently are doing. And then you'll know, hey, maybe I want to hire somebody to fix all of this because this is way too much for me to do. Or maybe you'd be pleasantly surprised with your on page and you'll realize that it's some other things that is potentially keeping your search rankings down, like those images and your load speeds. So it just gives you a better idea of where to spend your time or your money and where to focus to try and get the best results. And then on the images, you're absolutely right. I think we've become an instant gratification community or people or whatever you want to say. People are very impatient, even without realizing it or without trying to be. And so you just have to work within that system and realize that if your site is really slow, it's going to hurt you. And there are always things that you can do to speed it up. And then one thing I would also say too, on that note of just optimizing the page, is please realize how many people are searching on mobile. And this may be another tip that you want to talk about, but mobile page visual optimization is so critical because most people have no idea what their pages look like on a phone. And if you've never looked at your page on a phone or checked it in that mobile preview in the back end of your site or your landing page or funnel builder, then the chances are pretty high that it looks bad and that it's not pleasing to the eye, that it doesn't really give the impression that you want to give. Like you mentioned, it's a reflection subconsciously a lot of times of how people feel about your brand. And if the headlines are gigantic and things are just not in the order that they originally would have been if it was on desktop, and the things are not clickable, or there's just some images that are overlaid on top of the text accidentally, it just doesn't look good. And we are a country, but really a world in a lot of ways, that people are searching on a lot of these smaller devices first. Depend on the industry you're in. There are a lot of businesses that get mostly desktop traffic, but I'd say anything consumer focused, absolutely, you're going to receive a ton of mobile views. So just make sure to check that while you're checking these other things on page as well. So, what other tips do you have for us? Do you have any other ones, or where are we in terms of
And I'd
number one
say,
through seven?
we be able to get to all seven. But one thing that I would really encourage, as it's almost like a tip that isn't going to get you any rankings, so don't tune out, but it's actually one of your most important things. So it's setting up your analytics and being able to monitor what kind of data is coming through. So often we're pulling all these levers, but it's really about measuring and refining the strategy. And so one thing I would encourage you to look at is there's three main components that you want to pay attention to in your Google Analytics. It's traffic, right? How many new sessions or how many hits did we get? Conversion rate. So do we have a conversion goal set up? Typically you do if you have Facebook, AdWords, Instagram campaigns set up already. And three, what are users gravitating towards on the site? Like I look at it as average time spent on page, bounce rate. These are things that are basic indicators of what people are doing on your site. And one thing that you can do is you can actually go through and check to see what are my top performing landing pages. You would expect to see the homepage. What's your next one? What's the most popular blog? What's the most popular service page? And then the goal is to keep scaling what's working and trim the fat on things that aren't working. So if you're constantly paying it, I don't want to say constantly, but you should be looking on a consistent basis, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis at your traffic. Every week might be a little too granular, but every business is a little different, right? I'd say start looking at like a bi-weekly or a week over week view and then spread out to like a month or a quarter. And you can actually compare it to previous years, previous quarters, all kinds of like history that's being stored about your business, like a little data mining operation just for your business that only you and Google can see. And Google Analytics is one of those, it's literally like the treetop of importance, because if you're not tracking what's working, you'll never really know what's driving the leads. Whereas if you do have those conversion goals set up, you can see the hits coming in from your Facebook and from your organic search engines and from emails, and start refining down and saying, okay, like what are my top pieces of content and which directions do my users tend to go after they read this content? They're going to another page, or do we have a clear call to action on this page? Are they bouncing away? You'll start to uncover different things about your website, and you'll actually be able to keep scaling up what's working. So if you're like, hey, we wrote that blog on 5 things your dentist doesn't want you to know, and that really got some great traction to it, maybe we should do another series of that. Or perhaps we can dive into one of those 5 topics in a little more detail. Like maybe it's people that drink soda, their enamel's gone, or I'm oversimplifying this for those dentists out there, but like dive a little bit deeper into some of those subgenres and start creating more content around what people are actually interested in, and less newsletters, less, not that those aren't important, but there's a place for those, right? That's your email. On your blog though, you could always post that newsletter, but you might see that newsletter does really great, or you might see that it doesn't. These are examples. I'm not telling you literally to nix the newsletter, but it's really about finding the newsletters and or pieces of content that are working really well, and then trying to determine what about this like really grabs people's attention, and how can we start incorporating some of our learnings around this article or this landing page or experience, and start incorporating that into other areas of the site where we can see that users are dropping off. They just aren't engaged. I think to your point, Ali, like you'll find sometimes like the mobile experience is messed up, or you have that overlapping image, or all kinds of different things. The copy wasn't as dialed in as some of the other pages. There's all kinds of ways that you can start to make observations. The main thing is just knowing your numbers, just looking at that, knowing where your hits are coming from, and then being able to do a couple of experiments, right? Like in science class in high school or in middle school, you had a constant, you had an experiment, and you had like a constant, something that doesn't change. So it's about being a good experimenter and maybe finding 1 or 2 experiments a month or a week or a quarter, right? Depends on the speed at which you want to move. But just by knowing a little bit more about your business is actually going to help you look around the bend and start to identify trends and maybe future content points that you can start to incorporate, whether that's some kind of seasonal angle or some kind of series about a certain topic. There are multiple ways that you can dive in and start finding gems and saying, okay, people love whatever XYZ article, like they're definitely going to love ABC. And you start thinking like that, and that'll really help accentuate and move the momentum in the areas that are going to drive the most value.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of tracking, you guys know that I am a huge fan of high level. It's something that we talk about quite often throughout these different episodes. And there are several things that I really like to do inside of that system where this is concerned. So, number one, I like to get a separate call tracking number for Google My Business. You can also have a separate number for your Google ads, a separate one for Facebook ads if you're driving calls, so that you really have a clear separation in those calls in terms of where they originated from. And you also can have those call recordings, and it's going to be tied to the contact so that if that person converts, you can actually see, hey, this call actually became a customer, which is the single most important thing you could be tracking. But also using things like UTM parameters inside of your URLs so that you can see really specifically where people are coming from on your site, or whether they're coming from organic to that blog post that you posted to your social media profiles, and then they ended up converting. The other part is seeing that activity in the activity feed, being able to see every single page they've ever been to, every single click they've ever made, every conversation they've ever started. And so you will be able to get so much information on a content basis of where your converting customers are going on your site, which pieces of content they're consuming. And sometimes it might be their first interaction with you, or maybe you'll just start to notice that, hey, I'd say 75% of all of the clients that we started working with this year have all read this article, or they've all consumed this piece of content, so that you are able to really close the loop and understand which pages or which pieces of content are further convincing people that you are the right fit for them, so that you can tailor your strategy really effectively. So if anybody has not checked out High Level yet, there will be a link in the description so you can get a 2-week free trial and 3 SMS campaigns for free inside of that account. So that would be a really great thing to check out to really try and implement some of this. It's definitely not going to replace Google Analytics. That is something you absolutely want to have, but this will give you a lot more of that data without having to dig into Google Analytics on a daily basis. And it also connects with your Google Ads account and Google My Business account. So you'll be able to see those messages, to track those calls, to make sure you understand exactly what's taking place. And again, just close the loop on all of your pieces of content marketing, your paid advertising, and the internal marketing that you're doing to your existing list, all in one spot really quickly and easily. So if you had to give them one final tip on really where to focus or what to do, anything you think is something that would be really important to leave them with today, what would you say?
So we talked about Google Business. We talked about on-page SEO. We talked about some tracking and analytics. We talked a little bit about content strategy. The one I want to leave you guys with, since this is such a content-heavy audience, is what are the 5 to 7 questions that you're getting asked on a daily basis? And how do we create content around those questions and start to digitize that in-person sales process? And this really is more along the lines of creating content calendar, but Google's looking at your website as a Google's looking at your website as a source of information. And so your products and your services, that's like your main content, but your supporting content is like your resources, your blogs, areas of the site that aren't like your primary leading. Like, to your point, some people aren't at the bottom of the funnel, at the very top, and they're in that gathering mode. So what we tend to see is that if you can start to digitize that in-person sales process by blogging or creating FAQs or incorporating into some of the content on your existing landing pages around these 5 areas, not only is it going to help you pre-qualify and prep people, there's going to be a lot of consistency when they pick up the phone. They say, "Hey, I'm having this issue," and your website says the same thing that you would say over the phone, right? More importantly, you're going to actually add in what's called some supporting content. And so Google says, well, if you're a dentist, you should probably talk about every single thing that relates to dentistry in your area or relates to dentistry as a whole. And if you're offering teeth whitening services, how much does it cost? Or what are the different types of teeth whitening that are available versus the ones that you offer? And really start to be that source of water for your audience. Be that source of water in the desert, and they're going to come back. And you can always retarget those people. That's the amazing thing about social media and Google Ads, is you can have a retargeting campaign just for people. If you know that it takes people 6 to 7 times to interact with your business, you might just want to retarget those people. But you're also going to want to drive more of that people in that gathering stage who ultimately you want to come back to your business when they're ready. And so that's what we mean by water in the desert, which is create that content calendar, really put some thought into the questions that users are asking you. Put yourself in your consumer's shoes. Let's imagine you don't know anything about the products and services you sell, right? What are some of those differentiators and leading questions that are going to make a difference and give users enough information to make an educated decision? And that's really the basis of SEO, is great content. It's being of service. It's helping others find the right information. And once they get there, giving them all of the story, not just part of it, not just like the things that you think are going to move the needle, but also the things that might prevent them from buying your product or service. Or maybe they're comparing another brand, like what should be the points of comparison that they should be taking. And if you can empower and make them the hero, instead of, as local businesses, most people's websites look a little something like this: we are the best SEO agency. We offer SEO and content and page speed and AdWords, right? But like, That's all about us. It's all me, right? Like we really want to make it you.
Mhm.
So, right, get more leads and traffic. Work with a team of fractionalized experts that are dedicated to your success. Are going to help you pull the right levers to get great results in your marketing meeting or whatever it is. This is like a example, but you want to make them the hero for choosing you, not the reverse. So if your copy has a lot of I's and we's, change it to you. Flip that around, make it actionable. Hire a team of experts. Ace that marketing meeting. See more rankings, leads, and traffic. Rank higher on Google. You know,
Mhm.
get your teeth clean, like whatever it is. Tell them what they're getting and make them the hero for choosing you, as opposed to a huge mistake is, and it's one that everyone's guilty of this. It's just how we write. It's how else am I supposed to say this? If you can really focus a little bit more on, there's a book called The Hero's Journey, and making the user the hero instead of the business the hero. It's actually creating this culture. It's going to shift the conversion rate of your website, and it's also going to shift the way that people perceive you and your product. Create that content that answers their questions, position it around context of them, just add value, right? Same recipe that I'm doing on this call is literally what you should be doing on your website. Right? Don't be afraid to give away too much. Like the reality is they need. So how are we going to differentiate ourselves and make them the hero for choosing us? And sometimes, to your point, Alec, some of us just have this great experience and the client is the hero. We just don't have that reflected on our website, or we don't have that reflected on our Google business, or it's not as actionable in our copy. And so if you're doing the tracking, if you've got the tracking set up, you've got the right levers to pull in the content, which we just talked about, you're optimizing your titles and descriptions, you're optimizing your Google business, you're refining, rinse and repeat, so to speak, in terms of checking your numbers. Don't reinvent the wheel every month, but let's start taking some data points and seeing, are we going up? Are we going down? Most of the time it's going to improve. If you're doing what I'm saying, you're definitely going to improve. And then just maybe taking a look at some of the other people in your industry. And what I love to do is I'll look at people that are in more competitive industries, right? What are the best people doing, right? And that's one other strategy that you can leverage, at a local scale pretty easily, to say, okay, here's where we want to be, and here's our culture, and here's how we're different, and presenting that, to your point, like in the right order and clearly on mobile, right? And desktop. It's a lot of things we need to focus on as business owners. If we can guide our teams to create better content, create a little bit better user experience by making sure that we're not uploading full res images to the website, getting those reviews, you will, what we call snowball. That's the whole benefit of SEO, is it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's not going to happen overnight. Google business can happen overnight, but it's probably going to take you a little bit longer than that. Like it's a snowball effect. And so that time that you invest, or that energy or the resources monetarily that you're investing, over time can grow into this huge snowball that you're getting 5 times the traffic that you normally would at the same budget or the same amount of resources on another campaign. But it does take a small village, and it does take some time to get set up. Take action on what we've talked about today. You will inherently have a really strong foundation for some great rankings in the future.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And I will link to 2 podcast episodes in the description for you guys today, a content strategy episode, really helping you understand how to build that, and also a content topics episode where you will be able to discover the framework to create hundreds of content topics really fast in less than a couple of hours that you can utilize all year long. And I think that a big mistake a lot of people make, especially when they think of it from an SEO perspective, is they think they're writing for AI or for a bot or for the computers or the search engines, but really just focus on writing for a human first. Know the best practices and know what you should be doing, but don't try and format the content and the headlines and the topics around what you think the search engine wants to see. You really want to make it about what your users or your potential customers want to see and know. And going back to your point about people not wanting to give it all away, truthfully, almost every business listening should probably be sharing more than they ever thought they should. I run coaching and education business, and I put out free content really in-depth content all the time is not going to stop people from working with you. You just want to give them the answers that they're seeking. And if you're an automotive shop locally or a chiropractor, the information you're giving people, it only increases the desire to work with a professional. It does not make them want to try and do everything themselves. I think people realize they can't do everything themselves. They just want to get answers about what they need answers on, and they want to make sure that the person they do choose to work with is reputable, they're knowledgeable, they know what to expect, which your content will help prepare them for. And I think that if you can really focus on that and do that, it's going to be a lot easier than you may expect it to be. And truthfully, even though it may be a long term plan, you should be willing to do that because are you not prepared to be in business long term? I would hope so. So just realize, even if you don't see those results tomorrow or a week from now, that it will be well worth it in the end. And to your point, it just takes that consistency and that commitment. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. This has been such a great, helpful episode. I know the audience is really going to love it. And if they want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Check us out at David Finberg on Instagram. And you can check the team out at Peaks Digital, peaksdigitalmarketing.com. Feel free to hit the contact button if there's anything that we can do to support you or be of service during your journey. We're here to help. Otherwise, check us out on that social media, David Finberg on Instagram. We're doing a lot more different SEO tips and value add.
I hope you guys got a ton of value today. Make sure to check out the next episode in the description to learn more about some of these related topics. And I will see you back on the next episode. Have a good one.